You can buy a home based on the home's rental income and not your income. I'm Lisa Moisen. I'm with Atlantic Sotheby's right here in Virginia Beach, and I am your inside guide into everything you need to know about buying, investing, and thriving right here at the ocean. And I am here with Liz.
I'm Liz Copeland. I'm from Cross Country Mortgage, and I am here to help you find creative financing solutions to help buy those investment properties here in Virginia Beach.
Today we are breaking down the real estate market and lending options.
Yep.
There's a lot of conversation around these days. And we're going to break down specifically the Virginia Beach real estate market and lending. Obviously, right now in Virginia Beach, we are seeing a slowdown.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the interest rates do change the mortgage and how the affordability.
Correct.
Right. And then in the past years, we had such an influx that prices did go up.
Right.
And then I think that's kind of priced some people out of the market a little bit due to not having income that's being supported.
Agreed, 100% agreed. What happens is interest rates go up, and due to supply and demand, sellers are putting house prices up. So it's just a hard scenario for some buyers to even be competitive in this market, right? And what they want to qualify for, they can't due to where the interest rates are and also where the housing prices are. And honestly, wages in our country have not kept up with where house prices are right now.
Yep, absolutely. And then also sellers are going to be buyers. And so I think that's hard because I feel like buyers are having to take advantage of where they're going to be a buyer. They have to take advantage of their sales side to put them in a better position being a buyer. And I think that that's a hard place to be also because it causes sellers to hold on to their list price where buyers are saying, well, I can't quite afford that. And so there's a little bit of just a supply and demand. I think you have buyers that want to buy and sellers that want to sell, but we just have a difference in kind of who can buy and who is selling.
Correct. And right now we are seeing that I think 57% of the sellers are the baby boomer generation, but they make up 42% of the buyers as well. So the landscape has really changed. We're going from a first-time home buyer that used to average about 27 years old to right now a first-time home buyer averages 41.
Wow.
Yeah, big change, right?
That is a big change. I do feel like, overall there's three things. The inventory is actually on a rise. Affordability, and then certainty. Certainty has been a big thing that we're talking about as well. And then the market, but I honestly, having been in the real estate market for so long, I think that it actually is normalizing. We have this thing where all of a sudden, if something doesn't sell in 3 days, there's something wrong with our real estate market. And honestly, in a really normal market and actually a healthy real estate market, property values, they soften up a little bit, properties stay on the market a little bit longer. Your buyers are they're more educated. They know what they're doing. Nothing's hair on fire. Oh my gosh, get that offer in. No contingencies. Do away with my home inspection. Yeah. I don't think that's real. That isn't a normal market. No. And I don't even know if it's really a healthy market. So in that, when we feel like, oh gosh, the market's softening and buyers are concerned to buy in this what's considered an uncertain market because it feels good when everything's flying off the table and everything's flying off the market, you think, ooh, that's a market I need to be in. Right. But honestly, you're going to end up paying more for it because if interest rates go down or the market is actually hot, you're being competitive with other buyers. Yes. Your prices are inflated and then you end up paying more for that property. So is it a good time to buy? I think so. I think now is a great time to get into the market share and in real estate and be able to have less competition, be able to have that time to look at properties and really determine what fits and what works and put an offer in, and even maybe have basic contingencies. You know what I mean? Yeah. And be able to kind of buy real estate like it's meant to buy instead of just hurry up.
Right. I mean, the market since 2020 has been an abnormal market, right? March of 2020 hit, and by the end of March, the market was on fire. Yeah. And it was definitely on fire April, May, June that year. I mean, and it kind of went that way through 2021, and then rates went, if you think about it, we've been from 2% to 8% in 5 years, which is crazy. Think about that. People have rates at 2%, but people have rates at 8% also. And that's all transpired in 5 years, right? Yeah. So Where we are right now is we're at a place, like Lisa said, where it's really a good time to buy because rates are starting to trickle down. Right now, rates are at a 10-month low, right? So we are mid to low sixes, let's say. And the thing that is going to happen, it's like a tidal wave. I call it a tidal wave on the horizon. Like I can see it, right? And we're going to flip back to the hair on fire market because in May of 2026, we're going to have a new Fed chair. And it is said, and I think it is probably 99.9% accurate, that the new Fed chair is going to aggressively lower interest rates. Now, what happens is the market usually responds several months before an occurrence, right? So if we know a new Fed chair, our current Fed chair's term is up in May of 2026, we know a new Fed chair is coming in May of 2026, we're gonna see the market probably start to respond in like March of 2026. And it's said that when those rates hit low fives, did you know we're gonna have an influx of 5 million buyers into the market?
Yeah, that's terrifying.
It's terrifying because
I don't typically love those markets.
No, and visions of like 2020, 2021 come back to my head where there's a lot of cash flying around, there's a lot of appraisal gap guarantees, there's a lot of competing and bidding over asking, and then you're going into the house potentially with negative equity, right? Sellers putting upward pressure on house prices, builders putting upward pressure on house prices. So right now, when you talk about a good time to buy, right now is a fantastic time to buy because when rates go down, which this time next year, they will definitely be down, you can sit back and refinance while everybody else is fighting over a house.
Right. And I think that even goes for sellers. Most sellers are going to be buyers again in that
100%.
You're either a buyer and you're not buying again, or you're a buyer that's going to become a seller.
Right.
And although it seems like very exciting to be the seller on the upside, you're also going to be a buyer in that market. And all of a sudden now you're ready to sell your house and inventory is more limited. You're competing for offers, and that's way more stressful. Instead, being a seller now and getting realistic, but also being able to take advantage as far as being a buyer in today's market.
Right.
And, that would be the advice I would give to a seller is don't wait that out unless you don't have any reason to, you're not concerned about the buy side of things. Maybe you wait it out if you can, and, hopefully hit it more on the upside swing. But as far as, what advice would you give a seller? Because I feel like if they're going to be a seller today, but they're going to be a buyer today too, I think that they actually have more opportunities now.
Absolutely. Sellers today, it's interesting because you are seeing, as the market's slowing, you're seeing price cuts, right? And it's interesting. I'm seeing price cuts. I'm seeing a lot more seller concessions on contracts. So sellers, you can actually give a credit to the buyer for closing costs, rate buy down, prepaids. But when you think about slashing the purchase price, right? It's about $7, let's say, for every 1,000.
Okay.
So if you slash $10,000, you are helping the buyer with $70 a month, right, in their monthly payment. Okay. But some buyers would rather, instead of you slashing the purchase price, they'd rather you offer them an incentive, right? A seller's incentive toward closing costs, toward rate buy down, toward their prepaids, because maybe they're having a hard time coming up with all the funds for the down payment and all those things. So, you might want to think about that.
I love that.
Yes.
That is a great idea. Instead of having the price reduction, I like the idea of being able to offer certain incentives to the buyer in other ways that actually helps them moving forward and getting into that loan.
Exactly.
Wow,
and
that's great.
Buyers actually also really appreciate either a 2-1 buy down or a 1-1 buy down, which means as a seller, you're buying the rate down for them 2%. If you do a 2-1 buy down, you're buying 2% the first year down. So let's say their rate is 6%. Their rate would be 4% that first year.
Okay.
And then the second year, the rate would be 5%. And then the hope is they'd be able to refinance after that. So they'd never hit that 6% rate. If you did a 1-1 buy down, then you'd be buying down that 1% for that first year. So if their rate is 6, they'd be 5. And then hopefully we can refinance and they never see that 6% interest rate for their payment, right? And what sellers don't understand is a lot of times it's cheaper to offer a buy down than to just cut the sales price, the purchase price by $10,000. So have your lender run numbers on, is it better to offer an incentive to the seller, right? Credit toward closing costs, or is it better to slash the purchase price, or is it better to offer a buy down? And your lender can price out all those things for you and tell you what's going to be more impactful for your net as a seller, but also for the buyers that you're trying to attract.
I love that, because I have some listings right now that have been sitting on the market for the summer. I know that the market does change anyways in our selling seasons, and everything's kind of cyclic and seasonal anyways. And I'm absolutely going to have my my sellers reach out to you, because this could be an amazing opportunity for us to kind of get those properties moved as well. So we're sitting there right now. As we go into a market that might have an uptick, I know that buyers are always asking, well, what can I do to put in an offer that's going to be more competitive? And I always say right out of the gates, even over contingencies, because I like contingencies. I'm not for the seller. If I'm not working for the seller, I'm working for a buyer.
Right.
I'm working in the best interest of them, and I want to make sure that they are still protected. And I'll work really hard to make sure that their deal still gets accepted and be as creative as possible. But I think being creative doesn't necessarily mean giving up all the rights that the buyer has in a purchase agreement.
Correct.
And so I always say right out of the gates, get pre-approved. That shows the seller that you're serious. Also just shows that you are qualified. So when you are putting in that offer, sellers know that you have been approved for that qualification. So what do you kind of do with that pre-approval, or how do you get them pre-approval?
Absolutely. So I do a full pre-approval, which means I'm looking at credit, income, and assets. And I'm going to have you fill out my application link. I'm going to run credit. I'm going to go over your credit report with you. We're going to make sure that everything on that credit report is actually yours, right? And I'm also going to ask you to upload your income and asset documents. And this is so once Lisa puts in that offer with that pre-approval letter, I'm going to follow up with a call to the listing agent and let them know that I have verified all those things in black and white. I'm not just going off of what you told me. You telling me you make 120 a year, great. And I'm not verifying it. I actually am verifying it. And that way I can tell the listing agent that we've got a strong pre-approval, that I've verified those three things. And I can give the listing agent a guideline on how quickly we can close. Sometimes it is beneficial to the sellers to close before their next mortgage payment. And if it's a super clean loan, I might be able to close in 3 weeks. And that way the seller doesn't have to make their next mortgage payment. So that can be a win-win as well.
I agree. I think the other part of that is a lot of us think, okay, I make a lot of money, or I make good money. I'm pretty sure that I can afford a mortgage. I've been paying $2,000 a month in rent, so I should be able to afford a $2,000 a month mortgage. But it doesn't necessarily work that way, because I've had buyers who had something on their credit that they didn't even know was there.
Right.
And getting qualified actually was harder than they had thought. And so the nice part is get qualified now. I would not waste a minute going and talking to a lender and finding out what my credit score really looks like on a lending side. We also always get our little email, your credit score has changed, and you're so excited and you see what it looks like. But when a lender pulls it, it doesn't necessarily, it's not tit for tat, right?
Exactly.
It looks different. And so I think that is also really important, because when you really are ready to be a buyer, you don't want to be trying to go backwards and fix something on your credit score. A lot of times if something's on there, it might take time to either get it off of there or to work it off of there and do certain things to get your credit score up where you want it to be, because with a better credit score, obviously you get a better loan, right?
Right.
I mean, essentially you have a different way of being able to afford that loan. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is that how that works out?
So when you're looking at interest rates, you're looking at credit scores, right? And if you've got a 720 versus a 780, that makes a difference in your credit score. It also makes a difference in what loan type is going to be most beneficial for you. So you might have a 740 or you might have a 660, and then we're looking at different loan types, right? Based on the different credit scores. Your debt to income ratio might be higher than you think it is. So then we have to change the loan program to fit your debt to income ratio. So it's really important for us to find the best financial solution for you individually. A lot of people think just, their sister and brother-in-law got X type of loan and I need to get X type of loan, but that might not work for you. And that's why you really, mortgage lending isn't cookie cutter. You really have to have
Yes.
financial solutions for everyone you're working with. And that's very different depending on different situations.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's the overall takeaway, very specifically with lending. Don't wait until you're ready to buy something, because we're going to be able to use the pre-approval to determine your budget, your lifestyle. Well,
Right.
what are our parameters, which helps very much going into looking at real estate.
Right.
We're not maybe undervaluing where you could be, without knowing what your pre-approval is. We might be looking at something that's $100,000 less because that's what you feel like your comfort level is. But we could actually be looking at something a little bit more based because you have good credit score and they're able to put you in a better loan program that would offset that cost.
Right.
Or of course, vice versa, we're looking way too high above your budget and you're never going to be able to qualify for that property. And now we're just wasting your time.
Right.
And seller's times, and then tying up earnest money, and it gets more messy. So I think the most competitive way to write an offer is to have a pre-approval, for
100%.
sure, hands down. Okay, this is one of my absolute favorite conversations. Known to man, Liz knows, I talk about it all the time. I work with short-term rental owners and buyers and investors. That is kind of my little niche, and I love it so much. And with that, I have found that there is a very specific loan program. It's the DSCR loan. So it's the debt services coverage ratio. I always muddle that up, but debt services coverage ratio. And essentially that is where short-term rentals is, it doesn't necessarily have to be short-term rentals. It could be long-term, but investment properties that are income producing. There's a very specific loan program that is available for that. And currently I actually have had, this last year, I've had almost all of my buyers have purchased homes, even in Sandbridge, Virginia Beach, based on this DSCR loan. And so I want to kind of discuss that because I think this is super fun for a lot of people. And going back to our hook, our beginning here, it's an opportunity to be able to buy a property based on the income revenue that the property is producing versus not all of your income. Right? Okay.
Correct. So basically, we're qualifying the property based on, like Lisa said, the income that the property is going to produce instead of your income. So this is great if you're an investor. This is great if you're self-employed. This is great. You may not be self-employed, but you may have wonky income. So this is a great solution to purchase an investment property, whether it's a long-term rental or a short-term rental. And, even though they're both a DSCR product, it's very different the way you look at the income for a short-term rental and for a long-term rental. Right. And at Cross Country, we have different reports that we use to pull income for those properties so that we can determine what income is going to work to help you purchase that property. It is an amazing solution to really add to your real estate portfolio.
I totally agree. I absolutely love this. We have, and it is very interesting. It comes down to like the appraisal, and there's a lot of like behind the scenes, there's just so much going on to be able to do a DSCR loan. So I always say, find somebody who really understands the short-term rental real estate market, lender who understands that. It comes down to appraisers. I mean, there's so much that comes together to make this work. But because we've been doing it, and I've been learning all the inside trades and kind of figuring out what needs to be done on the back end, I've been able to make this a lot more seamless, where if you don't understand that type of loan, and really what is needed, what the qualifications are, it can get very messy very fast.
Yes, it can.
But I do have a lot of buyers who have been able to, like you said, build their real estate portfolio this way. And even now they've got properties that have been up and going for a year, and they're doing great, which also allows them to even get into another one, which you would never be able to do if it was really genuinely based on your personal income.
Right.
And you can also do, the one thing I love about DSCRs is that you can actually buy them as an LLC, which there's not a ton of loan programs that you can actually purchase as an LLC, correct?
Correct. We can close in an LLC on a DSCR loan. And one thing that I think really sets Cross Country Mortgage apart in this space is we have an in-house non-qualified mortgage department. Non-qualified mortgage is something that is not like a conventional FHA, VA loan, right? We have that department in-house. So we actually underwrite our DSCR loans in-house, which is amazing. We're not brokering them out. So I can, jump on a quick Microsoft Teams call with the underwriter for that DSCR loan product and work through anything.
That's huge.
It is
because
huge.
I mean, talk about the differences in the time frame between the lender, then talking about the underwriting and all this. It can become it just can become very time consuming, right. And it's really hard because it takes a lot of time to get through that chain of conversation of everybody in there. So having that direct line of communication is so amazing. Important. And you have such a great group of appraisers that kind of understand short-term and DSCR and long-term rentals and how the revenue is applied in the appraisal.
Correct, absolutely. And that is huge. Looking at the way that income is applied on a long-term rental versus a short-term rental is night and day. So you have to have an appraisal panel that really understands how to look at that when they're doing the appraisal for the property. Yeah,
I think that's huge. And that does not, so DSCR loans do not apply to second homes, because that's also, in Virginia Beach, we have our FHA, our VA, just our primary home buyer.
Right.
But then we have our investor buyer. But then we also have our second home buyer.
Right.
And what programs, or where are we kind of sitting with that particular buyer right now?
So with that buyer, so when you look at occupancy, right, you look at your primary occupancy, you look at your investment occupancy that we talked about, right, where you aren't actually occupying the property on an investment, but you were using it for either long-term or short-term rental to make income, okay? Mm-hmm. And then you've got your primary that you're actually living in. Second home is very interesting. It's got to be a certain amount of miles typically, and there's no really set on this, but it's typically 60 to 100 miles away from your primary address, and it's got to have something a little different. So if you are living in Hampton, Virginia, on the water, with a dock and a boat slip and everything, and then you're like, well, I'm just going to go buy a second home in Virginia Beach with the same setup, underwriting might kind of go, well, Hampton and Virginia Beach aren't that far, and you're buying a house on the water in Virginia Beach like you have in Hampton, like it seems too similar. You might actually be buying an investment property. So what you have to do is you have to look at what makes sense. So you live in Hampton, you live in Williamsburg, you live somewhere else, and you're buying something completely different in Virginia Beach. You're not in the water in Hampton. You want to be on the water in Virginia Beach. You're going to occupy the property at various times throughout the year. So it truly is a second home. And with those opportunities, we have 10 and 20% down payment options.
Okay.
Obviously, on a second home, the more you put down, if you put 20% down, 30% down, the better your interest rate's going to be. But we do have options where you can put 10% down on a second home.
Okay, I love that. That's amazing. And kind of reminds me a little bit on that investment side of things. The one nice thing about, with the DSCR loan, you're going to really be stuck with probably a 20% down, right? You're not likely going to be doing less than 20% down?
Not likely. There are some scenarios where you can, but honestly, to get the best rates and to be the most competitive in that market, you're going to do 20% down plus.
Okay.
And it really depends on credit as well, where you're at credit wise. We have different loan to value requirements. So if your credit is somewhere like around 660, 680, you still might be able to do a DSCR loan. However, your down payment is going to be higher than if your credit was in the 700s, right? So it's very, solution based for each individual, and running the numbers ahead of time, like you said, and looking at those things ahead of time and what makes sense too, because I'll have people who have the option to put down 15% versus 20%, but then they see the difference in interest rate and they want to go with the 20%.
Right.
Option.
And even then, if you do an investment property, the nice thing that I've got a ton of buyers that really still get to invest and have a home that is offsetting the cost of ownership, and they're actually producing some kind of income, but that is still a second home for them in the way that they are still they're doing income. When they're renting it on the off seasons or when it's not rented, they're still being able to enjoy it, which I think is such a cool part of the investment side of things. If you're looking to do that, otherwise the second home market is definitely the better place to be, I would think.
Exactly, 100%. And the other thing that's interesting too that we didn't mention with the DSCR loans, you talked about clients who have had their home for about a year and they're income producing and they're building their real estate portfolio. We actually do have a product where you can do a cash out refinance of that product on a DSCR loan
Wow.
to use that money from the cash out to purchase your next property.
Wow.
So that's another really cool option that, you know, you're making money, you've gained a good amount of equity, you want to pull cash out of it to grow your real estate portfolio. That's another great option too.
I
Use
love
that equity to work for you.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, I kind of giggle because as we're talking, you use a lot of words that I'm like, okay, I did not know those. I didn't even know half of those terms or even what most of that meant until I got into real estate. And probably years into real estate did I even really understand all the lending mumbo jumbo and all the verbiage behind it. And so I do want to make sure that people always know, like, we're going to put your information, my information, and that people can reach out to you very specifically, so that way you can really talk it through and give them the bigger gist. This is just a condensed version of it, but we want to make sure that you know
everybody understands.
But Liz is absolutely happy to break down your scenario, your situation, so you really have, so you really understand, you know, all the exactly how lending works and what all those big words were, because it doesn't necessarily mean we don't expect you to know them.
Right. But your solution, again, is unique to you as a buyer. So the first step is to contact Lisa, contact myself, so we can actually start to develop that solution for you based on your financial situation.
Yep, I love that. So whether you are buying, selling, or investing here in Virginia Beach, make sure you have the right team, because I do feel like that is a big deal. If your agent has lenders that they are working with and there's that good line of communication, I think it makes things feel so much easier, a little more flawless in the sense. If something starts to go a little sideways, it's really nice when your agent and your lender work together and have that communication, because they can jump in together. I also think that having an agent and a lender that really understand the current markets and loan programs and that kind of thing, they're educated and just have a lot of drive behind them, I think that really helps being a buyer or a seller, really, to really take best advantage of the real estate market.
Absolutely.
And then if you have any questions about loan options, make sure that you reach out to Liz. But if you're ready to explore any real estate opportunities in Virginia Beach, give me a call. We are going to put our information in the description and pin it in the comments, so please feel free to reach out. And remember to subscribe, like, and comment. But until my next video, be blessed and stay cool.